Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another tool review video for you. It is the Go2 Socket, and it's a universal socket type extractor for regular fasteners or perhaps rounded fasteners. It's basically meant to get you out of a jam. This one here in particular is for sizes 10 millimeter to 20 millimeter, 3/8 to 3/4 of an inch. It is a 3/8 drive. We'll start with the usual unboxing here, which will be quite simple. There's just sort of a plastic backing here. There's a little more info on how to use the tool here. And there we have it. It's quite simple. Here we go. Taiwan, so it's printed right there on the tool itself, its country of origin. So far it feels like it's made out of like decent metal. It doesn't feel like cheap metal, which is kind of nice. I like that. Cheap metal and tools, well, they don't quite go along together, but it does have some heft to it. It's a little heavier than you might think it might be. It's got this little adjustment screw at the top. Looks like it's a flat head, or there's some knurled edges around the outside here that could be for, like, say, maybe a pair of pliers. You could get a grip on there. In some ways, I'm a bit disappointed to see that this isn't like a bolt head to start with, because that way you could really crank it down. But then I stop and think, well, if you really crank it down, you might run the risk of perhaps breaking the tool. So maybe, just maybe, that's the reason for that design. But you can sort of see how it works here. And then you've got this little area that you're just sort of pinching a fastener down into when you use it. And I have some challenges to see if the Go2 Socket can handle those challenges. So let's get on with our review. So it says right here on the front of the package that it's able to twist rebar. Well, look what I got here. Piece of rebar. I figure I'll give it a try, and just to see if it can do exactly that. I'm just going to position this. I've got this mounted inside my vise. Position this here. Run it down with my flathead screwdriver. Make sure that it's tight. Now I'm using a ratchet for this. In all honesty, I think I would prefer to use a breaker bar. You put too much stress on a ratchet, you can actually break little pieces inside the head, but that's not what this review is about. But I know some of you are going to tell me about how I'm doing it wrong, so I figured I'll just get a little bit ahead of you on that. Now, let's see. I'm sort of making this easy. I've got like a long bit here to turn, so why don't I shorten the length of this a little bit, sort of take away some of its leverage. There, let's try that. It's twisting it in my vise. Yeah, it's just twisting inside the vise here, which means the socket is holding. Tighten the vise up a little more. Nope. But the whole thing is turning inside the vise. So I'm not able to bend the rebar, but that's not because of the socket. The socket's actually holding. The vise isn't holding it. The tool seems to be unharmed. Let's try it on some fasteners, see how it does. For this test, I am admittedly going for some low-hanging fruit, but this is not the end of my testing, so don't beat me up too badly over this. I'm going to try to remove this fastener here, which is rusty, but as I said, it's easy to get to, and I'm going to try to position the tool in such a way to where it fits on the fastener snugly. I've got sort of a angle that I'm trying to achieve here, and I'm wondering if the angle is really important as far as getting the Go2 socket in there and holding the fastener. But part of the reason I'm doing this is because we've got very little sticking up on the top of this fastener, so I'm going to try to sort of test its limits as far as what size fastener you can use this with, or what positioning. I think that's what's going to come into play here more than anything, is where you need to position the tool in order for it to be used. Once again, my 3/8 ratchet. And yes, this was a pretty rusty fastener, and I'm still having some difficulty getting it loose. But the 3/8 isn't having a problem. Go2 socket is also doing quite well. I'm using the longest 3/8 that I have to gain as much leverage as possible. And there we go. So we were able to move that very rusty fastener. And that's part of the reason I chose it, because I know that these get rusted up pretty good. But I was able to remove that. Had it been rounded, honestly, I think it would have come out just as easily, even without the little ends on it. But now, let's try it in a different situation to see if it's something that actually could be used and something that might be a bit more difficult.
Well, here is a challenge that I feel will challenge the Go2 socket. Now, exhaust bolts. They get rusty, they get old, sometimes there's nothing left to them, and as I often say, heat is usually the best thing to use here. Well, you don't have heat, and you may not have a means to get this off. I mean, you may try penetrating oil, all kinds of things, but these may be so rusted that there's no longer a viable fastener for you to use. So this may be a sufficient challenge in my opinion, and this was one of my concerns when I saw this, because this may be a situation where you could really use a tool like this. And like I said, you could probably put a pair of pliers around the outside of this. But I'm just gonna see, I have no penetrating oil in this, nothing, no heat, anything. I'm just gonna see if this, whoops, I hit my light though, if I'm able to somehow break this loose from its mount. And look at that. It is working. And if I put a wrench on the other side of this, I believe I could knock this loose. But before I do that, this was my concern. And right there. So you can see what's happening here is the socket itself has gotten to a point where it's not going to be able to go any further. Another thing I'm noticing is that just the way it is, it seems to start to slip off a fastener after a little bit. I think this is a good tool, and it has a given application, but I don't think it's going to work in all situations. This exhaust may be an extreme example of that. But so far, it's been able to break loose everything that it said it was capable of doing. I just think because of the size of the tool, there'll be certain situations where you're not going to be able to use it just because of space considerations. Not because the tool doesn't work, but because you can't get the tool down into a spot like that. However, it's pretty darn handy if you think about it. The Go2 socket. It's a pretty neat little tool. It's an interesting design. It seems to address a specific problem, and that would be rusted or broken or just oddball fasteners that you might not have a specific socket for. It does grip, it does do what it says, and don't get too down on me for not finding some fastener that was completely rusted away and rotted. I was trying to demonstrate that with the exhaust, although my exhaust isn't as rotted as I thought it would be. But one of the things that you might run into when using this tool is the fact that as you use it, it may end up in a position to where you need to remove the tool and then reinstall the tool and put it on in order for it to continue to work. Say you don't have air tools or you don't have heat or something. This may be the thing that gets you out of the jam. I'm looking forward to throwing this in the toolbox and breaking it out now and again in those situations where it might be warranted. As I said, this one is 3/8 to 3/4, 10 to 20 millimeter is its size range. I don't really have much more to say about it other than the people at Go2 Socket are actually giving a few of these away for a limited time. There'll be a link in the description to that giveaway, so you can follow that and look in on the details, and perhaps you can walk away with one of these to check out for your very own self. Anyway, hey, I am Eric the Car Guy, and if you have automotive questions, I would ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. There's a welcome video there to tell you about all of our amazing features to help you with automotive issues, should you have them. If you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. I post tool review videos every other Wednesday, so look for those then. Once again, don't forget about that contest down in the description, so go ahead and check that out. Close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, stay dirty, and I will see you next time for the next tool review or whatever.